All right, it is 6 o'clock. We'll call the Sartell City Council meeting to order for Tuesday, May 28th. Please rise for Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, council, next order of business is the agenda review and adoption. I'd take a motion on that.
I'll make a motion.
We have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That carries. No special presentations, no open forum tonight. Next is approval of city council minutes. We have the May 13th regular council, May 13th special workshop, and May 13th special workshop. Take a motion on all three if there's one.
I'll make a motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve all three. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Item 6, consent agenda. We have items A through G. We'll take a motion on that.
I'll make a motion to approve A through G.
We have a motion to approve A through G. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. On to new business. We have the NCS Community Survey and Results presentation.
Awesome. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I'm going to kick off the presentation and then turn it over to Nikki and Rob, but I thought I'd give a general basis for the National Community Survey, often called NCS, that we'll be presenting tonight. So this has previously been known as the National Citizen Survey. We'll each present different areas of this, so we're going to tag team it. And if you have questions as we're going through it, just if you can write them down. It's kind of a long presentation and we might answer it by the time we get to the end of it. And so we're going to try to go through the whole presentation and then take questions at the end. So just take some notes as we're going through. So just a brief background on the NCS survey. So it's considered a statistically accurate survey solution for local governments. It's in collaboration with POLCO, which is a research association, and then the International City County Management Association. It's kind of considered the gold standard of surveys that are out there. It provides a benchmarking survey, and then it also provides a survey directly to your residents. So there's two aspects of it. It collects their opinions and perceptions, but then it also compares them nationally to benchmarks. It describes areas where the community believes they're doing well, and then sheds light on areas where we could benefit from some improvement. Why we chose this survey, both because it's nationally recognized, we want to be able to benchmark nationally, but also the statistically relevant and accurate aspect of it. It's not something that Sartell has ever done before. There's a little bit higher price tag to it than your typical SurveyMonkey survey that we've done in the past. However, the really nice aspect about this survey versus anything else is that it is guaranteed to be Sartell residents. And so it's actually mailed physically to their residents. They fill it out and we can be 100% assured that this data is absolutely accurate and comprehensive and be able to be statistically relevant across our whole community. And so that was part of why we chose it. It's something we'd like to keep doing every 2 to 3 years. And then just as a reminder, this would be your community linkage event through your policy governance work that we're doing. So this is really kicking off that community linkage, which then will drive into your ends policy, which will then help us all determine our operational strategies. So that the timing of it also ties in really nicely with that. A little bit about the survey and what Nikki's going to present soon around the different livability matrices. And so there are currently 10. You can see all 10 of them up there. There used to be 8. They added the utilities facet, and then they separated health and wellness from parks and recreation. So now there are 10. So you can see all 10 of them there. Nikki's going to go through the results of all 10 of them. Just something I thought I'd point out right from the beginning, and you guys would have seen in your packets. Safety and the economy were determined to be throughout the survey to be the most important to Sartell, and actually most important and some of the highest quality as well. And so we'll present on that as we go through. As I mentioned earlier, a big reason why we chose this survey versus doing what we've done historically, which has been SurveyMonkey, which is a free platform that it's all online. When you do an online platform like that, you cannot guarantee that they are Sartell residents. There's no way to lock down IP addresses. Now, presumably, nobody would care about that survey except for a Sartell resident, but you just never know. And so it's really difficult to assure statistic relevance. 3,000 surveys were mailed out to a random selection of property owners in Sartell. So it's the largest we've ever attempted to gather input from. Of those 3,000, 530 were returned by mail. So we know for sure 530 respondents, physical residents of Sartell from that random selection. So it's an 18% response rate. In addition to that, we did provide an online platform that people could click off of our website to go take it. Now, again, you cannot assure that they are Sartell residents, and so that is not included in that 18%, and it's also not included in the statistic relevance. Polko, the NCS survey company who did the research behind this, have a margin of error plus or minus 4% with a 95% confidence. So basically, they feel 95% confident that within plus or minus 4% of these results, it's what the rest of the community would also respond with their results with. So that's an excellent confidence for us. You'll see there that 83 of the surveys were returned back to us as undeliverable. So that's part of, if you're trying to do the math on the numbers there, with how the 530 equals 18%. It's the first time we've ever conducted this survey. Again, it looks at the life in 2023 to 2024 because it was between December, January, February that the surveys were completed. We're really looking forward to a couple years from now when we can do it again and be able to compare the results of resident opinion over a period of time. For right now, the largest comparison is against the national benchmarks, which is similar sized communities, similar demographics, similar economic establishment of the community. You can see some general demographics that we shared there of who our respondents were. I won't go through those in great detail, but we just wanted to help kind of set the stage of, this data that you're receiving back and what it reflects. As we go through this, you will notice when Nikki's going through the responses that there are percents associated with each response, which reflects the residents' feedback on that particular item as being either excellent or good. So we combined excellent or good, or Polko combines excellent or good to determine that percent. And then also we made notes with a little red alarm symbol of areas where we were below benchmark, and we put a star for areas we were above benchmark. So just take note as you're going through what that percent reflects, and then areas where we were higher or lower. We just tried to call those out specifically. Just to give you an idea of the 3,000 surveys that were sent out, this is the random sample. So this doesn't necessarily mean these are the respondents. This is just a random sample of who was all sent a survey. So they tried to touch on all different aspects of the community in different neighborhoods throughout Sartell. So I will turn it over to Nikki, and she is gonna go through the bulk of this presentation, which is to go through each of the 10 facets and the analytical results for each one.
Mayor and members of the council, I'm here to present the NCS survey results. Again, as Anna said, if you don't mind writing questions down, we will address any questions at the end. I also wanted to let you all know that the survey results will be put on our website. We will use social media, texts, and emails out to residents who have opted in, and also a press release to the media out tomorrow. So if you have questions about the survey and the results, you can point them to specifically our website. Would be the easiest place to go. Okay, I know you've all had a chance to digest this a little bit, so I'm not going to read everything on every slide on the screen, but I'll use this one kind of as an example of how I'll go through them all. But we'll start with quality of life, and that really represents the natural ambience, services, and amenities that make for an attractive community. So that's kind of what the category means. We did get a 87% which rated it excellent or good. And again, as Anna mentioned, that is against the benchmark. So when we go through all of these, I'll kind of describe what it is, give you the percentage, and maybe point out one or two interesting things about it. One thing about the quality of life is, I know Anna mentioned this too, but economic health and safety are the top 2 priorities for our residents for the next 2 years. These are all the different categories in this, the quality of life. Just a couple interesting things to point out. 95% of the residents rated the city as excellent or good place to live. So I thought that was really a good thing. And 83% plan to remain in Sartell for the next 5 years. So interesting to see the longevity of people and that they hopefully are here for a very long time. The economy facet is how well the city works with private and non-profit businesses to promote growth, jobs, and general thriving community. We did get a 79% for excellent or good compared to the benchmark, and only 2% rated that poor. As Anna mentioned, on here, the red box blowhorns, that does call out where we are lower than benchmark. And so you can see on this one, the shopping opportunities in a downtown area is where we scored lower than the national benchmark, which I don't think any of us are surprised to see. But the overall quality of business and service establishment is 67%, which is right on par. So I thought that was a good balance, at least for that category. The mobility facet really includes things like street cleaning, street repair, repair of the sidewalks and paths, snow removal, traffic signal timing, and we did get a 65% rating. Interesting for this one, nearly everything in this facet was higher than the benchmark, so that was a really good thing for us. Again, this is just all the different categories that was in this facet. One thing to note on this one is that we did get an 8% with that considered it poor, which is one of the highest poor ratings we got. So again, that balance. Community design, that really just looks at smart land use and zoning, ensuring that affordable housing is accessible to all, and providing access to parks and other green spaces. We did get a 53% for excellent or good, and that was similar to the benchmark, so we were kind of right on par with that. One thing to know about this one is we did receive a 12% rated as poor, which is the highest we got of all of our poor ratings for all the different categories. But if you look at all the different categories in this one, we still had a few that were higher than benchmark. The one I would like to maybe point out is the code enforcement, and it's interesting in all the different categories where residents really believe we have a clean city, and I think code enforcement is really one of the big things that maybe keeps our community clean, so that was a good one. Utilities, services such as water, gas, electricity, and internet access plays a vital role in ensuring the physical and economic health and well-being of the communities they serve. We did score at 74%, which is higher than the benchmark. So that was another good one. The garbage collection, I just thought I'd point that one out. We're doing really well on that, so that's good. 6% did rate this as poor, though, just to note that. Safety, shout out Chief Kradowski, Chief Silliard. We're really rocking in this one. This was definitely the highlight of our residents really do feel safe, which is a really great thing to see. As you can see, they rated us 90% for excellent or good, which is above the benchmark. And 94% feel safe from violent crime, which I think most of us can attest and agree with that. These are the other categories in the safety facet. My personal favorite is animal control. We're really doing really well. We're above the benchmark on that one. So, the natural environment. This is just to clarify what this means versus like, it's not Parks and Rec. It's using the river, it's preservation, it's air quality and open spaces. That's really what is meant by the natural environment. And we rated an 80%, excellent or good, which is similar to benchmark, which is great. Again, you see the cleanliness of the city at 91%, which is higher than benchmark. So the cleanliness you really just see throughout. Parks and Rec. So this one we rated 83%, which is similar to benchmark, but the availability of paths and walking trails is higher than benchmark, which we can all attest that we've been working really hard the past few years to get those gaps together for the sidewalks and paths. So that's really, really cool to see that people are noticing that. Health and wellness, the characteristics of and amenities available in the communities in which people live. So the Central Minnesota Healthcare Hub would be a great example of this. We're at 81%, which is near benchmark, but the availability of preventative health services, we are higher than benchmark. And again, you know, the Central Minnesota Healthcare Hub probably really plays a vital role in that. Education, arts, and culture, we rated 55%, which is similar to benchmark, so kind of right on par. Some of the areas that we thought we'd point out are the opportunities to attend cultural arts, music activities, we are lower than benchmark, and the public library services, we are much lower than benchmark. So two things to note there. Don't think either one of those are surprising to any of us either. But our education system is higher than benchmark, which I think we can all agree on too. The next one is inclusivity and engagement facet. 60% rated the connection and engagement with their community as excellent or good. These are all similar to benchmark, just to point out. 92% viewed Sartell as a good to excellent place to raise children, which is awesome. 67% viewed Sartell as a good to excellent place to retire, and 66% rated Sartell's sense of community as good or excellent. Those are all right on par with benchmark, and I liked in this one to see the different, the diverse age groups that place to retire and raise children, how we kind of cover all of that, and so that was kind of cool. Again, more different categories in the same facet. All these have ratings similar to other communities throughout the nation, but I wanted to point out that this is a new measure for many communities, so it'll, as we do this in years to come, I'm sure that we'll see these build a little bit. Governance and participation, so really how are we as a city connecting with residents? We are basically on benchmark for all of these different categories, but again, this is a new measure for many communities, so again, as we do this more often, I think we'll be able to see how this grows. Going through more of those categories in that facet, I wanted to point out the first one because it's, 35% were below benchmark of residents have contacted the city for help or information. It was interesting because we're like, well, I think that might be a good thing because people don't have to contact the city, which means we probably are a lot of our services are online and people can navigate through figuring things out without having to call us. So I'm going with it's a good thing, but. All right, I will turn it over to Rob.
10%.
Thanks, Nikki. And to build off the other questions that we had asked, we took the opportunity to ask more pointed custom questions to pull some more from our residents. So the first one being a tax question. The options were to increase taxes to maintain services. As our costs continue to increase to provide said services, our revenue is not keeping pace. So we had to ask these three separate questions. So increase taxes to maintain services, maintain taxes and reduce services, or a combination of the two. 48% strong or somewhat support the first one, 44% for the second one, and then 44% for the third one. So with the 4% margin of error, it's not conclusive which one our residents would like, but all very close to one another. The other tax question is, in a scenario where we have to reduce our taxes, what is the priority? And in order based on medium and high responses, our first was street repair, second fire, third police, fourth parks and trails, fifth community center, and sixth engagement, which we'll get to in a few slides, but is pretty consistent with how we levy our property taxes, is how they prioritize each of these services. We had also asked a sales tax question. So there's talks regionally amongst increasing the sales tax, although right now we're in a sales tax moratorium, so it won't happen over the next year or so. But in a scenario where we do bring this to the voters, 57% strongly or somewhat support an additional sales tax to improve regional amenities such as a pool or redevelopment of the mill site, which we thought was important information if we were to bring this forward.
What was the percentage that failed? 80? When it went for a vote, it got shut down by 80 probably percent.
One of the other things that we appreciated about Polco and the NCS survey is that they, as a part of their analysis that they do in the consultation, they provide key findings for every community based on their results. And so these are the 4 key findings that they drew from the actual survey results. So I thought I'd call out before we get into those 4 key findings, where are the areas that we ranked higher than the national benchmark and then where are the areas lower. So you can see here after Nikki's comprehensive analysis of each of the facets, here's the areas that she had called out where you saw a star that we ranked above what the national benchmark is. So as you can see, several different areas from a variety of different facets throughout the survey. These are the areas where we ranked lower. Shopping, downtown, culture, arts, music, public library services, and then contacting the city for help. So we were pleased to see that there were significantly more higher than lower. I think that's a good place to be. And in some ways, some of these, I don't think any of these really will be all that much of a shock to anyone. And as Nikki mentioned, the contacting the city for help could actually even be considered positive in that we're providing better resources electronically. So with that, the 4 key findings, you will notice as we're going through these 4 key findings, something that stood out to us is that there's a theme surrounding the potential of the Mill District. The survey confirmed for us really the critical opportunity of the Mill District and what it could help offer to the city in addressing some of our residents' priorities and areas of importance that they identified through this. And so kind of keep that in the back of your mind as you're going through this. That was something that really stood out to us, that the Mill District could help resolve a lot of these critical priority areas. So with this first one thing that Polco was able to draw from the survey is that the economy is both a priority and a strength for the city, which is somewhat rare. A lot of communities will identify it as a priority, obviously. A strong economy is a top priority, but not only is it a priority, identified as a priority in a community, but also as a strength. So 9 out of 10 residents stated the economy was essential and super important, and then 8 out of 10 that the overall score of our overall economic health was excellent or good. So just to, you can see the suggestion there out of it of really continuing to prioritize and allocate resources towards economic development and the overall economic health, invest in programs that support local businesses, enhance the business environment, and particularly in areas where we fell below the national benchmark, such as shopping in a downtown area. So that's where the Mill District really draws an awesome enhancement opportunity for us to be able to prioritize that and help with some of these areas that the residents called out. Second key finding, and you saw this from the results as we went through, that we scored well above the benchmark for public safety. So this is really a key strength for our community. It's been identified as residents as a key strength. So nearly all residents felt safe or somewhat safe, 96%. 9 out of 10 had positive ratings of their overall safety from violent crime. All of these scores were above national benchmark. In fact, nearly every single aspect of the full safety analysis was between the 80 to 90% range, which is just off the charts for measuring safety in the community. So the really important suggestion and key finding out of this is that it's a strength for us. It's really important. We also have really high quality and we need to maintain it. And so it helped affirm to us that we're budgeting appropriately, because over 50% of our budget goes to public safety right now. And one might say that that's too much to go to public safety, but not based on what we're seeing here. It's incredibly important to people, and they feel that the quality is justified by our budget allocation. So our budget allocation is appropriate, but then also continue to watch factors that might change in the community. So call volume, crime, population, and if those things start to change, obviously then that might be a time to consider allocating more resources. So this was an excellent key finding for us on prioritizing our budget allocations. The third key finding is that Sartell residents value the natural environment and preservation and enhancement of this. So this is a little bit different than like your neighborhood parks and like park structure systems. And as Nikki mentioned, it's more about the natural environment. So it'd be things like enhancing and embracing the river, or your park and open spaces, more of your natural parks like a Sauk River Regional Park that, you know, it's got the bike trails and more of your natural walking activities. So this was, in this area, we were above or similar national averages. 91% put it as excellent or good. A big key piece of this one, as Nikki mentioned, is just what we saw as a theme throughout the whole survey was cleanliness, and whether that's related to code enforcement or just general cleanliness of these park and open spaces. Preserving them, providing them access to them, the walking trails and the paths are obviously a key priority. So given the residents' appreciation for this, continue to invest in this area. It could include funding for more green spaces, improved services, you know, access to water resources, and making sure that they're preserved into the future. So this was one area where we scored higher. I don't think that that's a surprise to anybody either, just like public safety. I think between public safety and our open spaces and our trail connections, those are two big draws of why people come to Sartell. The last key finding is, and the area where we had the most poor responses, I think it was like 12%, if I recall correctly, is around community design. And so the overall rating on this was around 53%, so suggesting that community design is a potential area priority. Now the unique thing with this is obviously we can't redesign a whole community. It's already been done, and so it's just really making sure going forward that we're following appropriate land use, that we're following the appropriate policies and processes through that our ordinances are up to date. We just went through a whole revamp of that. An interesting piece is that 2/3 of the residents did feel like we have really well-planned residential. It was mostly related to commercial. Another aspect of it that we could focus on is just the public gathering spaces. And again, I think that's where the Mill District can really become an opportunity for us. One of the things that we were really using this survey for was to ensure that we are matching our budget allocations and really moving more towards that priority-based budgeting. And so this calls out quality versus importance. So this is based on purely resident feedback of how they answer questions related to quality versus importance of each of the facets. And ideally, they're as close together as possible. You want them to match, but remember it's within plus or minus 4%. And so, for example, mobility, nearly identical. So we want the importance to the residents to match the quality, which of course matches our budget allocations and how we're able to afford these things. Rob just ran a budget prioritization. This is just from our levy, so it doesn't necessarily include capital improvement funds, but strictly from a 2024 levy, looking at our current budget allocations. And so again, when we were reviewing this and reviewing it with Polko, felt like it was an affirmation of how we're budgeting today. Rob, is there anything that you would add to that? Again, that was really one of our top priorities, trying to ensure, do we need to revise what we're doing in our budget, and what should we do going forward with budgeting of allocating to areas that are of high priority? But it really affirmed that we're budgeting appropriately. So with that, what are our next steps from a city? And then we also asked this question of Polko, like what do they see as the next steps? So Just a general reminder that there are no bad results. These are meant to help us improve. It offers insight into residents' perspectives, analyze the results, identify areas to prioritize, but most importantly, act on the survey results and be responsive and help build credibility there. And so Nikki's engagement efforts on sharing the results and showing to people, here's what the collective response was, and here's what we're doing to act on it. This was Polkel's recommendation to us, as how most communities are using these results to envision, engage, earmark, educate, enact, evaluate, any one of those or all of them combined, which is really what we're using it for as well. As far as Sartell specific of our next steps, and so our next step will be to start really aligning this with our ends policy, which you guys have your first draft of. We had already seen the results, so our first draft that we presented to you reflects a lot of this, but we can really probably hone in on that, which helps us then to align our priorities and begin our budgeting process, and for us collectively as staff members to create our operational strategies out of the ends that you're setting from this community linkage. So it will going forward be consistent monitoring of those ends, and from a staff level, we've really been tying it closely with KPIs and performance measures so that we can really show where are we seeing trends where things are changing, or we might need to adjust some of those allocations because we know the importance of a quality of one of these facets. And then of course the fun part, which is to start working on implementing some of these strategies to help achieve our ends and reporting back to the community regularly. Rob, do you want to touch on this? This was a document that Rob had found in some of his GFOA trainings that he's been going through around priority-based budgeting. If you want to walk him through that.
Yeah, so Anna provided a really good comprehensive view of our next steps. This is more of just a visual for us to help understand how we align our community priorities to our budget. So we have our community input conditions, which is the NCS, and the council end policies that you guys are working through, which feed into our operational strategies. Once we have operational strategies, we can begin long-term planning and identify those programs and services, and then identify performance metrics for each of those program services to help keep everybody accountable, and that feeds into our budget and how we allocate resources. And so we're budgeting for results, the results of said performance measures and goals, rather than the line item incremental budgeting that we've gotten into the habit of doing. So really nice visual of how it all will tie into budget and budgeting for results.
All right, with that, Nikki, Rob, and I will take any questions that you guys might have. I know that's a lot. I think it was 42 slides. So, but we wanted to try to get through it all before taking any questions in the event that we answered any of them as we went through. So happy to take any questions, and we'll kind of take team answers to it.
Council, what questions do you have? Judd?
I just have one question. If we're going to use this as a benchmark, can we move forward? Obviously, mailing is how we're getting back, and that's just part of the verification process, but we also had 92% 35 or older. So as we do that, we're missing a segment of our community. Is the survey people talking a little bit about like other methods to try to also, one, ensure they're Sartell residents, but also try to hit that age demographic?
Yeah, we had asked them about that, specifically around, obviously the mailing gets right to their household, but it would be nice to see different aspects of how they can ensure that we're getting Sartell residents, but making it available on other platforms. As of that timing, which was in December, they, at that point, but they said that with AI and more information coming out, they're getting better about being able to like lock down IP addresses if you were to share it online and be able to allocate it to, but as of that time, they hadn't yet. But they're very aware, not just from us, but multiple communities, that it'd be nice to be able to have this survey in more ways than just a mailing.
Yeah, just to add to that, it was interesting. The mail we were getting back was a lot from apartments, and that is probably the this demographic that we're missing. When once we sent it through like 3 times through another mailing, and then we kept getting less and less back. So eventually they got it, but I don't know how much that demographic looks at their mail compared to, so yeah, it's interesting. And we did bring that up to them, and like Anna said, they're aware, and we do know there needs to be other ways, but this was what we worked with what we had at this point.
And follow up that, with the online responses, did you compare those with the mail responses? Were they consistent, or were there differences?
Yeah, they were fairly consistent, and in the final report, I think they separated them out at the end, the online only ones as completely separate from the responses by mail, but in general, the responses were consistent and similar. And so that helped them, I'm sure, feel confident in their 95% confidence rating too.
Yeah, and the mailings, whoever got the mailer did have a online option too, so they weren't necessarily all mailed back in. They could like scan their QR code, and it was their specific code, and go take the survey online. So it wasn't like they had to fill it out and mail it back, just so you guys know.
And those onlines were kept in it or taken out?
Those online were kept in it. The other ones that like we just shared the link to anybody could take, that was separate.
Are we able to subgroup the analysis by demographics? So like you could look at the different age brackets or the even location of where.
Yeah, so they have a whole site that they've given to us that you can narrow it down to, I mean, it's pretty impressive. Age group, own a home, rental, nearly any category you can think of, you can narrow down how they answered responses.
And have you been able to look to see if there's any outliers between the different, like if you look at, like as an example, age or?
I'm trying to think if anything jumped out.
Well, something specifically I was looking at was the people that reported that they didn't feel safe, where did they live? But they weren't able to provide us with the actual location of each survey. But that would have been really nice information to have. I haven't looked outside of that to narrow down demographic and how they answered a particular question. But
one that I think about would be, how are the retirees responding to, is Sartell a great place to retire, versus how are the younger demographic responding to that, right? And vice versa. I'd like to segment out the retiree group from saying, hey, this is a great place to raise a family, and I'd like the family group to tell us that.
Yeah, I think we can
Maybe we
dial,
can
do you want to
filter that
take
down.
notes of that? I think we can dial it down by age group for those particular questions.
And the mobility stuff too, as
Yeah.
far as, if you live in a neighborhood that's connected to the trail system versus not, things like that.
Yeah, so the hard thing with the neighborhood piece is that it was a random sample, and then when they returned it, it wasn't necessarily connected with a direct address. They weren't required to share it. And so, to Rob's point, that was one thing that we'd ask about public safety too, is can we dial it down to the exact neighborhood? That stays more broad level, but you can by their demographics specifically. So you could do by like a rental home versus a ownership, which I guess in some senses could help narrow down location.
Interesting. Is the intent then, if we were to resurvey in 2 or 3 years, that the same questions would be asked so we can see as a community our?
Yep, and so this is their templated survey. It's what they send to any community that engages in this. And so there's quite a few in the state of Minnesota alone. We actually had first heard about it from the city of Hutchinson, who we have done a ton of our work around our compost site with, and they've done some really progressive opportunities there. And so we had reached out to them to learn more about how they've done it. They've done it over a course of, I think they're on their 4th or 5th survey round of it. So they're really able to watch trends over time. And hone in on where the areas we need to, focus our improvement. And they said, once you get to that 2nd or 3rd round where you can really start to monitor the trends is where it's impressive. The benchmarks nationally is awesome. It's a great tool for us. However, as we know, no one community is the same. So you can on the site, you can narrow down as close as possible to benchmarks, but it's still super difficult to show the specific unique features of one community versus another and completely compare them against. A 20,000 size community might not be exactly like Sartell, and so those benchmarks can only be used to so much of a degree for our help, but if we can really follow those trends, survey after survey, that's really where you start to dial in and watch where they go up and down. And so they actually provide a whole nother report to you once you get to doing a second one and a third one where they're comparing it against your previous one, which is super interesting.
And can you compare yourself to just Minnesota cities?
Yeah, yep.
Did you guys look at that?
Yeah, we've tried to dial in as much as possible on there, but I will tell you that the site is very overwhelming with how much of information is on there. If there's something specific you want, we can probably go pull it, but there's a lot of analysis that they put into that.
It'd be interesting to see if our highs and lows are the same relative to Minnesota.
Minnesota
cities.
versus national.
National.
Yeah, you can do it by national, you can do by Minnesota, and then you can do it by just your benchmark communities, like just communities that are of your size, of your, similar demographics. And so it is super interesting to compare it against all those different categories, just to see that, okay, nationally, when you throw more people into it or more communities into it versus narrowing it down to just Minnesota. Yeah, it is a really neat tool. It's very overwhelming. There's a lot in there, but it was very helpful that they gave us this analysis, because that tool we'd still be analyzing those results. There's a lot in there.
Council, any other questions? One I had was economy and commercial growth showed as a strong need and or desire. Is there an equivalent survey for commercial and businesses?
They have like 6 different platforms, surveys that they can send out. This is their general community survey one, but there is a business and like economic development one that they do too. So if we wanted to do that, they're not the most cost-effective way to do a survey, of course, doing one on our own, but it is the most accurate and statistically relevant way to gather information. So I can put out in my Friday update what the other different areas that they do offer surveys on. There's quite a few that we can do. I think there's an education one, there's a business one, there's a complete just honed in on public safety one.
I look at it right now, we have a handful of residents that are telling us that it's important. And to get an understanding from the businesses of what attracted them to Sartell, what's keeping them in Sartell, and what would it take for them to convince other businesses to move here, isn't something the general resident is going to be able to tell us. And so I think for us to do something actionable with that, we would need to get their feedback, but we can see what that would entail. Lots of great feedback in there, and excited to see where we go with it. Council, one thing that stuck out to me that I think we need to workshop and talk through over time is are we acting in the best interest of the community and residents felt open and transparent? Both of those are about 50%, and so I think what can we do to bolster that again, not taking away from all the positives, super positives in there, but when half is responding that way, it's a little bit of a wake-up call that I think we can respond to as well. Anything else? Excellent, thank you. Department reports, admin.
Mayor, members of the council, you have my report. Let me know if you have any questions. I don't have it in front of me, but I'm happy to answer any that you might have.
Council, any questions for administration?
Awesome. Thank you.
No. Finance.
Yes, good evening. We had a couple large items on consent, as you guys had noticed, the AP automation and personnel items, which should both provide a lot of benefit to our department, so thank you for your support on each of those. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have on the report or either of those 2 consent items.
Any questions?
Any candidates for your position or recruiting? Are we gonna go out and find somebody?
We'll post it internal for 10 days, and we're pretty confident we'll have a couple internal candidates. So excited about that opportunity for them.
Excellent.
Great, thanks Rob. Community development.
Mayor, members of the council, you have my monthly report. I just wanted to highlight a few things. As of this monthly report, we are under our 3 days average for permit approvals, which is great. We have added most of our permits within our online system with fire, rentals, and anything building related, so that's awesome. I also wanted to highlight something that'll be a big item for us later this year is our annexations that are stemming from our orderly annexation agreement from 2019. We are sending out a letter in early July to the property owners that are affected by the annexations, and I plan to attend one or two of their meetings prior to sending out that letter, so at least the township board is aware, because they do have new members on their board as well. So that will be a big item. That'll be later this year in December for those annexations. So you may hear some feedback from residents from the township or even the township board as well. Any other questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions for community development? Carrie, love that we're getting in front of the annexation and the letter. Is that topic of just educating their board something that we should bring to the next joint board to talk through, or are you planning to do that one-on-one with them, or?
So it's outlined within our orderly annexation agreement, the process that we'll follow. One of the steps is sending out a letter to them so we can get feedback from them or anything that they have in response to the annexations that's upcoming. A few of the properties have changed owners, so I do know there are a few that are not aware. But just talking with legal, we have monthly meetings to make sure we're ahead of this. She said it's not necessarily a joint planning board meeting that would need to be attended, but more so just the township board being aware.
Good. Just don't want any of the board members to be caught off guard. I think they've got one new one, but okay.
One follow-up. Do we have a number of properties that we forecast or project?
Yes, it's around 20. A few have been annexed since the initial approval of this, including where the new daycare facility will be, and then one or two off from there. But it's around 20 that are outlined within the category A and B. And then there's about 20 more that have deferred assessments in that category as well. But the A and B are the ones that are going to be annexed according to our agreement.
Thank you. City commission updates.
None at this time.
City council committee updates. Tim.
Nothing tonight.
Jill.
Nothing tonight, thanks.
Alex. Jed.
Nothing tonight.
I have nothing further. Look for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.